Hi, if you want to watch exclusive content with hot girls that you won't watch on YouTube, namely where Naruto roasts Kushina and Mikoto and many other hot girls without restrictions, then visit my Boosty channel at the link in the description. It was already getting dark, and the holiday garlands glowed poisonously in the semi-darkness of the street. Through the windshield one could see the oblong church on the hill, the wooden roof of the hotel, the black web of the forest in front of the dying horizon. Sasuke slowly looked away from the window and leaned back in his seat. Something cool barely noticeably brushed his neck and immediately disappeared. Itachi smoothly removed his hand and smiled tiredly from the back seat. Nesbo's novel looked rumpled on his lap. It seemed as if the book, like a living being, was experiencing a semblance of fatigue. The pages were bent, here and there were dark spots, like bruises under human eyes. Naruto pressed the gas pedal harder. He felt uncomfortable in the car, not only because of the tense family atmosphere. The very need to drive baffled Naruto Uzumaki. Even as the capital's Minister of Culture, he did not drive often, preferring public transport, which, by the way, was considered exotic in his area, and strange at that. His fellow officials looked at him askance and whispered. Naruto Uzumaki installed Wi-Fi in the subway, set up European parks, and naturally, did not stay in government office for long. One man is no warrior in the field, Kushina remarked thoughtfully, without even turning to face her son. Sasuke endured the dismissal in silence. He had been silent a lot lately. Now, for example, the five of them had been in the car for almost 4 hours, and Uchiha hadn't said 3 sentences. He kept looking out the window and thinking about something. Reflective hero, Naruto said to himself with arrogant pride. Uzumaki liked to say something like that even in his thoughts, because he had learned a lot of literary, ornate things in his youth, when he was courting the best student of the philological faculty, his future husband at the same time. Sometimes something like, "The subjective romanticism has not been cancelled, but has acquired the flesh of the objective," or, "The metaphysical tautology has fallen apart," would slip into his speech. In such situations, he would turn a little pale, blush, and then smile broadly, as if pleased that he and Sasuke were so similar. This similarity melted away like smoke over the years. Naruto sometimes felt like he and Sasuke were strangers. Uchiha was busy with literature and raising Menma. Uzumaki was busy with Wi-Fi and parks until he was fired, and so they lived separately in the same house. "Damn it!" Menma suddenly screamed, throwing his iPad down on his lap. "Damn it!" "Don't swear," came the immediate remark. "And why doesn't your iPad have a case? Money doesn't grow on trees." Orochimaru looked at the right. He himself did not know who his adopted child was to him. Sometimes he called him grandson, but immediately caught himself thinking that it was strange, wrong, and a little stupid. Orochimaru called the boy simply Menma, even in his thoughts. The remark about money went unheeded. Then Orochimaru resorted to that sneaky trick that all insecure adults love to resort to. "Sasuke," he called. The Uchiha turned slowly. His black, tired eyes slid first over his guardian, then over his son. How strange it was to see the trace of anger and sadness on Sasuke's face. What was he yearning for? What was missing in his life? No one but Naruto could answer. "For God's sake," Uchiha finally said, not very clearly, and turned away again. It was always convenient and easy to hide from unnecessary squabbles under the warm wings of reflection. All sounds in the car died down for a while. Only the heater hummed slightly, and it was decided not to turn on the radio. There was a slight frost outside, but there was not a single snowflake on the road. The asphalt was heated. "They have nowhere to spend their money, or what?" Orochimaru thought angrily. "They'd be better off promoting moral values before they rot completely." Naruto sighed. Sasuke remained silent. The doors of the houses were closed. Only the windows were lit with yellow squares. The night promised to be moonless and snowy. Itachi again placed his palm on the front seat and said quietly, "Even velvety." "Naruto," called the agent. Uzumaki shuddered, as if awakening from his thoughts, smiled confusedly and reached for the phone. He felt the warmth of someone else's hand under his fingers and pulled his palm away. Sasuke slowly raised his gaze and finally took the phone. "I'll call," he said calmly. Keep an eye on the road. Sasuke, like all philologists, had amazingly beautiful hands, thin, graceful fingers. 10 years ago Naruto laughed, kissed them and said that even Queen Anne of Austria did not have such fingers, narrow wrists. Now, looking at Uchiha, Naruto felt nothing but emptiness and burnout love. He found the phrases from the classics, and the dry rose, and Anne of Austria, and everything else funny. He even regretted a little that he hadn't divorced and married that sweet girl, Hinata. He didn't love her. Love didn't jump out in front of him like a murderer jumps out in an alley. He simply had warm feelings for Hinata. He liked her like he likes spring or a lush rose. Hinata would have raised his children. She would have only knitted and not contradicted him. She wouldn't have looked at him with silent reproach and wouldn't have suffered like Sasuke was now. With her everything was easy, but with Sasuke it wasn't. Good evening. Naruto heard Uchiha's voice. It's Sasuke. We're almost there. A quiet crackling sound and unintelligible speech came from the phone. Okay. Sasuke replied and pressed the red reset button. Well? Menma asked, putting the iPad in his backpack. Sasuke slowly pulled on his furry collared jacket and unbuckled his seat belt. We'll be there soon, he said quietly and ruffled Menma's hair. He snorted, became embarrassed, but did not move away. The car left the main road, turning onto a country road winding between snow-covered bushes. Very soon a two-story wooden house with a mezzanine became visible. It looked very cozy and comfortable, with a wide yard. Standing on the porch was Shikamaru Nara, an FBI agent, and Harino Sakura, the same girl from whom the Uzumaki Uchiha family intended to rent a house. As soon as the jeep stopped, Menma jumped out of the car, pushing Itachi aside. Menma! Naruto shouted, slamming the door behind him. But the younger Uzumaki had already disappeared without a trace. He rushed past, disappearing behind the front door, decorated with a fluffy Christmas wreath. Shikamaru was in civilian clothes and looked like an ordinary ski enthusiast. How did you get there? Okay, thank you, Itachi replied politely, helping Naruto drag his bags and suitcase into the house. Sakura nodded once in greeting. She stood slightly to the side the entire time, wrapped in a huge pale pink ski jacket. Soon the lights were turned on in the spacious living room and hall. Things were laid out in the corner. Shikamaru took out a sealed envelope from somewhere and put it on the coffee table. Here are your new documents. The house and the grounds are guarded. This is... The agent slowed down as you already understood, Sakura Harino, the owner of the villa. The rent has already been paid to her, but if you have any questions about switches, household goods or shops, call her. Here is the number. He slowly dictated a series of numbers twice, folded the piece of paper and put it in his jeans pocket. So, as long as there is no threat, you can move freely around the resort and the city. If you suddenly notice something suspicious, report it immediately, your life depends on it. Naruto nodded reservedly and looked at Sasuke. He was sitting on the armrest of the sofa and staring at the speaking agent. Uzumaki suddenly decided to touch his palm, but Sasuke removed his hand without even flinching. He had lost his cousin just 2 days ago. And although they were not particularly close, the death had a profound effect on the future of Sasuke and his family. Uchiha Obito had been killed in the same way as Mikoto and Fugaku 20 years earlier. The investigation had reason to suspect that Sasuke and Itachi's family was being hunted. The serial killer was clearly highly intelligent, and the only way out was the Witness Protection Program. You have my number. I'll be in the house next door. Shikamaru finished and nodded goodbye. Everyone stood up. Goodbye, Sakura said quietly and left. Silence fell. Up above, Menma was throwing something at the wall. I guess we should go to bed, Naruto noted. And tomorrow we'll unpack our things. Sasuke silently stood up and walked over to his bag, starting to take out his neatly folded clothes. Sasuke, Itachi called softly, lightly touching his brother's shoulder. He's right. The younger Uchiha didn't move for a moment, then shrugged his shoulders and, still without saying a word, went upstairs. The stairs creaked under his steps. For a while, they were still illuminated by bright light, but then Sasuke slowly began to close the door on the second floor, and the steps sank into semi-darkness. Naruto suppressed his irritation, wished everyone good night and also went upstairs. Water dripped faintly in the kitchen. Menma had stopped smashing everything in his room. Apparently Sasuke had told him to go to bed. Orochimaru locked the door, looking around the snowy courtyard just in case, then pulled the curtains and went into his room. Only the elder Uchiha stood motionless in the middle of the room, listening to the sounds, the howling of the wind, the slamming of the door, someone's quiet, cat-like steps in the corridor on the second floor. Itachi checked the back door, grabbed his bag, and turned off the light. As he passed Naruto and Sasuke's bedroom, he heard nothing. No talking, no laughter, nothing. He sighed and closed the door quietly behind him. "Do you want me to make a bed for myself on the couch?" Naruto asked, unusually seriously, changing his t-shirt. Sasuke was reading in bed, his face completely inscrutable in the yellow light of the bedside lamp. "Sasuke," Naruto called tiredly, still not waiting for an answer. "You wanted to get a divorce," Uchiha calmly noted, still looking at the book. Uzumaki sat on the edge of the bed. "I didn't say that." Uchiha put the book down. "When my brother was killed, you were having dinner with Hinata. And when you came home, you told me that it might be better for us to live separately. How should I take that? Your cousin was never particularly close to you, Sasuke." Uchiha turned pale with anger and even bit his lips slightly. "Bastard," he said in a completely calm voice. "All these tales of friendship and loyalty are just rotten apples." Naruto turned around abruptly. "Don't you dare. You made it so that I had nothing and no one left except you, and then suddenly decided that it was your duty to start a normal family. It's hard to get used to that." Sasuke had never stooped to sorting things out before. He rarely said what he thought, because Uzumaki usually understood him without words. There was no need for these accusations and sharp metaphors. No, Sasuke did not think that everything had been perfect before. There had been arguments before, even fights and breakups. They had experienced all sorts of things. But then there was no fatigue or irony, that sure harbinger of a break. Sasuke still remembered the times when Naruto took him to meet his parents. He remembered how they sat in the living room, which resembled a flea market. He remembered how the lamp glowed dimly, and the reflections played on porcelain kittens, antique icons, vases, and dusty tea set. How Naruto said that Sasuke was a professor of philology, while he was only a candidate. Kushina then crossed her arms over her chest and asked, "Do you have glasses, Sasuke?" Sasuke answered negatively. "Well, that means you're lying, you're not a professor." And then this woman laughed. She really liked Sasuke. And how could he, a defiantly handsome young man, a real Antinous, not be liked by anyone? No. The younger Uchiha spoke little, poorly observed the rules of politeness, but for some reason everyone without exception loved him. The younger students adored him, always asking him to play with them in the yard. The strictest teachers and university professors smiled at him. Life itself seemed to smile at him, but he continued to see in his dreams only the dead bodies of his parents and the bright walls of the psychiatric hospital. Until Naruto Uzumaki showed up, of course. Then the dreams dissipated, gratitude heated up in the Uchiha's soul to an incredible temperature, and became a light crush, and after a while a heavy love. Sasuke felt Naruto's gaze on him and flinched. He slowly put the book down on the nightstand and lay down. He clicked the switch, plunging the room into a darkness unusual for city dwellers. "Naruto!" The Uchiha's voice sounded especially heartfelt in the darkness. "I don't want us both to feel despair at the end of our lives." Naruto wanted to say something, but remained silent. I dove only into the fluffy blanket and lay down with my back to Sasuke. It was scary to turn around. The glass was fogged up by the hot breath. Menma greedily looked at the landscape floating down. The funicular shook slightly, the skis swayed rhythmically. "Have you been skiing before?" asked Sakura, who, it turned out, worked part-time as an instructor. "Yes," Sasuke answered. In his large hat with a pompon, he looked much younger than his years. "We often went to the slopes on the French side." Naruto smiled so widely that Sakura took it for flirting and turned away with slight irritation. Orochimaru chuckled sadly. He was the only one without ski equipment, as he couldn't stand all this snow, cold, and wind. The very idea of spending the holidays at a ski resort seemed to him like some kind of senseless attempt to chase after false values. He was generally wary of other cultures, not always even acknowledging their existence. In his homeland, The line between patriotism and nationalism was very thin. Orochimaru spent most of his life at a military base, in the genetic research department. Even there were dark rumors about the professor, usually boiling down to unproven pedophilia. However, no one knew the truth, and Orochimaru himself liked to scare a careless foreigner with fiery hell. Once, he looked under an American's hat, wanting to find out if he had horns on his head. The video got over 100,000 views on YouTube, and the professor was quietly fired. Now only the devil knew what he mixed there at home, but the neighbors tried to stay away from him. The only exception were, perhaps, the Uchihas, who were not at all averse to making dubious acquaintances. When Mikoto and Fugaku were killed, it became clear that no one in the family had warm feelings for the children. Itachi was already showing his genius at that time, and was feared. Sasuke was rarely taken seriously. The burden of guardianship somehow fell on Orochimaru, and no one bothered to figure it out. In the end, the professor was sure to break his teeth over Itachi, so no one was particularly worried about the fate of the brothers. Whatever bad things they say about the former scientist, he provided Itachi and Sasuke with a good education. True, Sasuke had to visit a psychiatric hospital for quite a long time. Naruto never understood what he was being treated for. The younger Uchiha never spoke about his childhood and youth. Only once did he admit that he himself remembered almost nothing because of the drugs. The funicular slowed down smoothly. Through the glass windows the slope itself became visible, a small cafe in the center. There were a lot of people. The colorful down jackets made my eyes dazzle a little. The sun was lazily emerging from behind the feathery clouds. Sakura told where and what can be found. She studied with Menma for a bit and left. "I'm going to the black track," Menma announced and was already rushing forward, but Naruto deftly grabbed him by the collar. "You and I will be on the blue one, and it wouldn't hurt Sasuke to unwind a little," he said with a smile and pushed Menma towards the slowest descent. Sasuke shrugged and walked towards the black track. He was a pretty good skater, better than Naruto, but not as good as Itachi. The elder Uchiha grabbed the skis more comfortably and followed his brother. Orochimaru went to the cafe, hoping to get something hot. The day passed lazily and slowly. The speed and the scenery took your breath away, but this euphoria was so fleeting that it was forgotten after 5 minutes. The meeting was scheduled for an hour, so that they could then have lunch together and go home. Naruto looked very lively after 2 hours in the fresh air. His face was so red that Sasuke couldn't help but suspect him of rolling around in a snowdrift. Menma had a nasty habit of falling face down in the snow in winter and messing around there, and Uzumaki, like an eternal child, would jump after him and start messing around too. Then Sasuke would treat them alone with pills, sprays, and drops, only to come down with a cold a couple of days later. "Shall we go?" Menma asked, rocking impatiently on the spot. His black jacket was covered in a lot of wet snow, his hat was slanted to one side, but he didn't even think about adjusting it. Sasuke had to do this. The younger Uchiha did not forget about the contemptuous look towards Uzumaki. Only Itachi remained relatively dry. He never fell. "You're a real monster," Naruto remarked in a friendly manner, clapping his brother-in-law on the shoulder. He liked to call Itachi brother-in-law sometimes, just to have a little fun. The elder Uchiha looked at him carefully and even smiled slightly. "You'd better not experience this yourself." Naruto laughed. The cafe was quite cozy. The food was not bad. The family dinner was going smoothly until a terrible roar shook the air. It was as if a clap of thunder rolled across the sky. People immediately ran out from their tables, running to the windows. At first glance, nothing around had changed. The waiter came out, cast a slow, thoughtful glance over the area and remarked, "Avalanche." Someone screamed, there was a rumble, a whisper, a stomping. All this fuss was incredibly irritating, and Itachi tiredly touched his forehead with his fingers. "No, not here." The waiter calmly interrupted the panic. "Don't worry, please. It's just an echo." Everyone, seemingly even a little disappointed, returned to their interrupted meal. Menma twirled spaghetti onto his fork without enthusiasm. A slight vibration could be felt through several layers of fabric. "Phone," Naruto announced and began to look for his cell phone somewhere in his pocket. Orochimaru ordered coffee again and turned away. Naruto wasn't sure if he had gotten up to see the avalanche. Yes? Shikamaru, hello? There was silence on the other end of the line. An avalanche has occurred, Nara finally said dully. Uzumaki nodded. We heard. The road is blocked. We are completely isolated. Sasuke looked straight at Naruto, who tried to appear as carefree as possible. Yes? He asked again, a little stupidly. A slight sigh was heard. Perhaps it's even to our advantage. Extra protection won't hurt. Naruto nodded as if the agent could see him. It should be noted that I highly doubt that it is possible to hack into the Witness Protection Program database. It is nonsense. He talks so much, Uzumaki realized with alarm. Shikamaru, you know, my intuition. I'm used to relying on facts, not intuition, Naruto. Please remain calm. The beeping sound was heard. Naruto smiled, folded his hands on the table and looked around the room. Everything is fine, he said, giving her a thumbs up. We're doubly safe now. Even Menma looked at his adoptive father with some distrust, propping up his cheek with his hand. Sasuke calmly put down the utensils and said nothing. However, Uzumaki Naruto was partly right. At the end of the day, nothing remarkable happened. Everything was calm and measured. They played Monopoly until the very night. Menma behaved like an ordinary child. He gave away money out of spite, just so that no one would collect the Monopoly, and then got offended at everyone and ran upstairs. Naruto never made a bed for himself on the couch, even though he promised. The weather was miserable in the morning. The sky was gray, fog hung over the town. Its milky paws embraced the streets, and nothing could be seen at arm's length. It smelled of spring freshness and wet earth. And this was right before Christmas, when you wanted crystal snowdrifts and a light frost. Menma was making a creepy snowman in front of the house. I'm going into town, Sasuke said, tying his scarf. Need anything? Ice cream, Menma demanded without much hope of success. Sasuke didn't answer. I'll go too, Naruto said suddenly, standing up. Wait, I'll get ready now. Shikamaru was smoking on the veranda, peering into the fog. When Naruto and Sasuke came out, he put out his cigarette and wished them good morning. Naruto smiled. We're going to the city. Nara nodded, dialed some number, and spent a long time telling the agents that they needed to stay in the city for safety. Naruto forced Uchiha not to take the car, and they walked for about 20 minutes along a country road, and then along the highway. The snow crunched softly underfoot. The coniferous trees seemed especially green and fluffy. The orange silhouette of the sun peeked through a thin cloud. Do you think now is a good time for gifts? Uchiha hid his hands in his pockets, looking straight ahead. You tell Menma yourself that we didn't buy him an Apple Watch because of the maniac who is hunting our family. A car sped past, sending brown spray high above the asphalt. Uchiha took a step to the side and almost fell into the snow. Explain to him why now is not the right time, Sasuke added coldly. Uzumaki sighed, realizing that the truce was being called off. He sometimes caught himself thinking that he was trying to mend the relationship almost automatically. Sasuke must have felt it too. He wanted certainty, and Naruto could give him everything but that. Ahead now rose the central high church. The alpine village was still lightly and sweetly dozing. People were not walking back and forth along the streets, the rare shops were open, but the air already smelled wonderfully of hot chocolate and fresh pastries. Somewhere behind there were FBI agents with cardboard cups. We're safe here, Uzumaki suddenly said, coming quite close to Sasuke. Whoever this maniac is, he won't be able to get the data on the Witness Protection Program. You only speak truths now, Sasuke noted. For a moment, sadness flashed in his black eyes. Naruto shrugged. I wanted to cheer you up. I'm not afraid, Uchiha answered simply. The shop with various handicrafts was already open, and Sasuke was the first to take a decisive step towards the porch. The door was heavy, massive. When it opened, the bell shook, filling the spacious room with a piercing ringing. On the shelves lay checkered blankets, cups with portraits of Mozart for some reason, sweets and Christmas decorations. The salesman was nowhere to be seen for some time. Then a girl of about 20 in a large white sweater came down from somewhere on the second floor. She looked worried. Naruto grabbed the first thing he saw and took it to the cashier. He asked to wrap it nicely and laid out crumpled euro bills on the counter. Sasuke also brought something, paid in cash, looking at the elegant satin decorating the wall. Suddenly the bell rang again. This time the sound seemed nervous, intermittent. Uzumaki saw 2 FBI agents. The cups of coffee were no longer in their hands. "We must return to the house immediately." Sasuke looked at Naruto with what seemed to be some reproach. "What's the matter?" Uzumaki asked as calmly as he could, shifting his grip on the gift bag. Hell, he didn't even know what was in it. The agents exchanged glances. Someone rushed down the street screaming. The church clock loudly announced itself. One of the ski instructors didn't come home last night. "We don't know yet if it has anything to do with your case, but there's no point in taking risks." There were at least 20 people standing in the main square. Still, for such places, a missing person is an unusual occurrence. We had to return home in an FBI car, in mournful silence. There was no one standing in the yard, the curtains were drawn, and a thin line of steam was rising from the chimney. Shikamaru sat in the living room and smoked. Orochimaru looked at him with disdain, but was in no hurry to make a remark. "Where's Menma?" Sasuke asked, quietly putting the bag of gifts behind the dresser. Itachi looked up from his reading and looked at his brother. "He plays upstairs." The logs crackled quietly in the fireplace. Naruto even felt a little ashamed that he hadn't helped chop the wood. Shikamaru stood up and walked around the sofa with a significant look. The instructor was last seen leaving the base. In other words, he disappeared somewhere along the road from the slope to the city. Nara fell silent, looked somewhere at the floor and continued. "Even if our killer is from the Senju clan, there's no way he could have gotten here so quickly. It's impossible, so the missing person has nothing to do with this case. Why would an Uchiha killer steal an instructor?" Nara now looked like Poirot in his youth, which would have been funny if they had not all been isolated from the world in a town where, in fact, they were easy prey. "This disappearance seems like a coincidence to me," Itachi said calmly. "After all, he'll probably show up in a couple of days." Shikamaru nodded and rested his elbows on the back of the couch. "In any case, it would be better for you not to leave the house now unless absolutely necessary." Naruto suppressed a sigh as he looked around the room. Spending time in a confined space with your almost ex-husband and his crazy relatives, while a serial killer roams outside the window, what could possibly be better? "And is this really necessary?" Shikamaru asked again, leaning on the porch railing. Naruto nodded. "Otherwise I'll go crazy here." He sighed, rubbing the back of his head. Nara looked over his shoulder strangely and turned away. A bad feeling pierced his heart and made Naruto look back. Sasuke stood silently, leaning his shoulder against the door frame. "You've been crazy for a long time now," he said calmly and walked past. "Damn it!" Uzumaki cursed through his teeth, getting into the car and starting the engine. The FBI agents settled into the back seat. There was really no need to go into town for groceries. On the 4th day, you could eat pasta again. No one ever died from that. But Menma was tormenting everyone, and Naruto really hated being locked up. "They still haven't found the instructor?" Sasuke asked, turning to the agents. "No," one of them answered. We continued driving in silence. The city was even quieter than usual. The souvenir shops were closed, but at least the grocery store was open. The agents remained at the door. Naruto wanted to take the fish, but Sasuke looked at him like he was an idiot and returned the Dorado back to the refrigerator. "What?" Uzumaki asked warily. "Fish doesn't keep for long, so we'll soon have to go shopping again, and we were told not to leave the house unless necessary." The Uchiha seemed to be even a little surprised that Naruto had demonstrated such short-sightedness. In the end, it was decided to buy canned food, water and a tub of ice cream for Menma, for calming purposes. There was a young man working at the cash register, about 20 years old, a brunette with short, soft hair. He didn't have a badge, and he didn't ask Naruto's name. Before ringing up the groceries, the young man looked at Naruto and Sasuke. "Foreigners," he noted. "What insight?" Uchiha said in perfect German. "I can't imagine how you guessed. How similar he is to Sasuke." Naruto suddenly thought with horror, looking at the young man. "You have a strange pronunciation." "I'm Sai," For these places, literary pronunciation probably seems strange in general, Sasuke said coldly, not even thinking of introducing himself in response. Sai began to punch in the products. How much poison? Aren't you going to decide that these chips have been yours all your life, therefore you can take them without paying? No, Naruto answered with a smile. We are immigrants. But he appreciated the joke, by the way. You can take a person out of a country, but you can't take the country out of a person, Sai snorted. Even if you're a philologist. Suddenly, something clicked from behind. Uzumaki couldn't quite say how to describe the feeling. He just grabbed Uchiha by the collar and forced him to bend over. The next moment, something glassy burst, and shards fell to the floor with a loud ringing sound. Sai looked at the broken display case in amazement. Lie down on the floor, Naruto whispered, grabbing Sasuke tighter. Then everything was like a dream. A whistle, a dull sound of falling, a red bud on someone else's white shirt, the number 4 on a broken watch. Something seemed to catch fire. Naruto felt the gentle touch of heat on his cheeks. It seemed to him as if some memories had rushed in and drowned him. Their power was extraordinary. He ceased to be aware of where was up, where was down, where was truth, and where was a lie. He looked at Sai's body, while all that was going through his mind was, how similar he is to Sasuke. Uchiha nudged him with his elbow, but it had no effect. Get out of the building! They shouted from outside, but the voice suddenly died down. Naruto watched as the agents disappeared into the doorway of the opposite building. Apparently that was where the shooter was. He sat on the floor, staring at Sai with an unblinking gaze. He had never seen death before, though. In fact, he had no proof that Sai was dead. He had not seen the breath freeze in a dry chuckle, the fear peeking out from under the eyelids for the last time. Ha! Naruto said inaudibly. Women, children and philologists should be saved first. Sasuke got angry and hit him hard. The blow was very unprofessional. Uchiha seemed to knock the soul out of his negligent husband. Uzumaki shuddered with his whole body and stepped back, as if waking up from a long sleep. Are you crazy? Sasuke asked calmly. No, Naruto answered honestly, swallowing and hugging his knees. Uchiha looked out from behind the cash register and looked at the street. Let's go, he said. Naruto carefully grabbed the heavy bag and threw it into the air. The next moment, the bag shattered into colorful pieces, and a rain of marshmallows fell on Sasuke's head. I think this is a bad idea. Uchiha shook off the sweets in irritation. If we sit here, we'll definitely kick the bucket. Naruto chuckled. What phraseological units? Shut up. They slowly crawled between the shelves towards the exit. Various barriers protected them. The hole in the display case was right in front of the car. They were damn lucky. There were only a few steps left to take, to get into the car, and then come what may. Naruto was the first to run out of the store, throwing the door open, listening to the whistle of bullets hitting the hood. The Uchiha somehow crawled to the passenger seat, not even flinching when the glass of the windows cracked. Uzumaki pressed the gas pedal sharply, and the bullets continued to hit the sides and hood of the car. Lucky it wasn't the wheels, Naruto thought as he turned onto another street. Uchiha was breathing heavily. He had a scratch on his shoulder from the glass, but otherwise he looked unharmed. Got off with a light fright? Uzumaki asked, turning to Sasuke. He didn't answer, just looked around at the landscape and suddenly stood up sharply in his seat. What the hell? Where are you going? Naruto turned back to the windshield. Calm down, he said. Sasuke would never admit it to himself, but right now something resembling fear really did slip into his soul. Naruto, he said as evenly as he could. Stop the car or I'm jumping. No, you're not jumping, Uzumaki answered just as calmly and pressed the button to lock all the doors. Now, perhaps, it was time to start panicking. The car pulled out into some alley, then onto a forest road. Naruto turned the steering wheel sharply, wedging himself between the trees and leaned back in the seat with a sigh. Sasuke looked at him expectantly. I'm sorry, Naruto said. Uchiha honestly expected anything: the click of a fuse, the bomb counter, the appearance of the head of the Senju clan, basically everything except what actually happened. Uzumaki simply grabbed him by the collar and pulled him towards himself. Dark fingers squeezed his neck, forcing him to look into his eyes. And then everything seemed to roll back 10 or even 15 years, when all the arguments ended the same way. Naruto kissed him, holding him tightly in place. A moment or two later, Sasuke's palms pressed against his broad shoulders in an almost serious attempt to stop this madness. But Uzumaki just suddenly picked him up too easily and pulled him onto his lap, continuing to kiss him. His hands slid down his jacket to his hips, and then to his ass. Sasuke shifted and froze, feeling that Naruto was actually hard. It's adrenaline. And Uchiha was pressed closer again. Naruto unbuttoned his jacket, put his cold palms under his sweater and moved his hips a little, which even made Sasuke blush a little. Adrenaline? He asked again. Uzumaki smiled and stroked his cheek with his knuckles. No. Sasuke intercepted the hand and pressed his hot, dry lips to the palm. Damn, let's do it, in the back seat, otherwise we'll suddenly press the steering wheel. The echo will carry for several kilometers. The Uchiha grinned, smoothly lowering his hand to his stomach, lifting his sweater. The side window even fogged up due to the heated air, and Naruto barely suppressed the desire to leave a mark on it, like Rose did in Titanic. Sasuke climbed back first, wrapped his arms around Uzumaki's neck, and pulled him towards him. Naruto lowered his jeans and winced when Sasuke's slightly sweaty palm touched his cock. Here, Naruto said hoarsely, fishing out some lube from his jeans pocket. Look! Uchiha continued to move his hand, casting a quick glance at the tube. Are you sure this hasn't expired? Naruto laughed hoarsely and pulled down Sasuke's pants. No, until 1917. Damn, it had been so long since he'd touched Sasuke like this, felt his tremors and heartbeat. How long had it been since he'd loved him? It seemed like forever. Or was he just dreaming it? All this hostility, irony, maybe it was just a bad dream? Yes, a 4-day dream, that's all. If Uchiha hadn't been moving his hand over his cock, Naruto could have even imagined that this was his and Sasuke's first time. Because they hadn't slept for probably a year, and Uchiha wasn't in the habit of cheating or playing with toys. Uzumaki stretched him for a long time, carefully, without stopping kissing. Then he looked into his eyes a little timidly and turned Sasuke with his back to him. He said nothing, only laid his head on his crossed arms. Naruto moved the cashmere fabric from his back, kissed his shoulder blades, lower back and even the inside of his thigh. He entered quickly, halfway at once, listening to the short cry. The Uchiha dug his fingers into the seat and pulled back, although Naruto was sure it hurt. It was so unbearably tight inside Sasuke. The air in the cabin had thickened, and his head was spinning. At first, Uzumaki heard a suppressed groan, perceived the gentle modulation of Sasuke's voice, a smooth transition from one tone to another, and only then realized that he had moved. The Uchiha suddenly sat up. Naruto saw both his tightly pressed lips and his furrowed brows. Sasuke's damp palm fell on his neck. Sasuke, I'm sorry, Uzumaki hoarsely declared, holding Sasuke by the hips. He moved closer, turned slightly, trying to enter as deeply as possible. Uchiha threw his head back, cried out weakly. His other hand grabbed the seat. Damn! Sasuke cursed through his groans. Wait, not like that! Naruto had to hold on to Uchiha tighter, continuing to move his hips wildly. He knew that Sasuke was good now. Just a few touches to his cock were enough for him to come. Sasuke's body became so relaxed, Naruto noticed his tired grin, his slightly open eyes. Just a little more, Uzumaki said quietly, running his nose along the pale cheek. Uchiha swallowed and nodded. I guess when he was so vulnerable and calm, that's when he was most arousing. Naruto moved inside Sasuke for a few more minutes, and then he came with a muffled groan, grabbing the seat with his slippery palms. It was necessary to do this, wasn't it? Uchiha asked calmly, feeling drops of sperm running down the inside of his thigh. Naruto chuckled, nuzzling his nose into the black hair on the back of his head. Sasuke always smelled so nice. Sorry, Uzumaki replied, carefully stepping out and helping Uchiha sit down. Right now! He rustled something, opened the glove compartment, and fished out some napkins. Give it to me, Sasuke said tiredly, taking the pack. I'll do it myself. They burst into the house, hugging each other, forgetting about the sniper, the store, and the napkins that they somehow stuffed into their pockets. Naruto still didn't leave Sasuke's side, kissing his cheeks and neck. Finally, he pressed his face against the wall and hugged him convulsively. Sasuke leaned his head back on the shoulder that was so carefully offered and stroked his arms with his fingers. Uzumaki didn't move, inhaling the scent of hair and familiar cologne. "We need to tell Shikamaru everything," Sasuke whispered, stepping back a little. "It's a miracle we're still alive." Naruto touched his pale cheek with his wet lips, exhaled heavily and repeated, as if by accident, "Miracle." The front door slammed. Uzumaki squeezed Sasuke's hand in his and nodded. He asked him to wait upstairs and promised to come quickly. Sasuke walked up the stairs in silence. For a moment, he thought he saw Menma's silhouette over the railing. But the first thing Naruto saw when he turned the corner of the hallway was the barrel of a gun. Uzumaki raised his hands in confusion and smiled. "It's me." Shikamaru lowered his gun. After all, this agent had nerves of steel. "Actually," he said suddenly, "I wanted to enroll in the construction institute, go somewhere by the sea and not have to deal with all this crap." "I'm sorry," Naruto replied. "And I really feel sorry for that." Nara lit a cigarette, sitting down in a chair. "2 of our people have been hospitalized. Reinforcements will only be able to arrive in 2 days, when the rubble is cleared. Some instructor has disappeared. What the hell does he have to do with this?" In fact, Shikamaru wasn't angry and was calm. He was just starting to realize that something bad was happening. The killer couldn't find out where they were that quickly. Well, he could, but on one condition. Provided that someone from the family or, God forbid, accompanying FBI agents gave him the coordinates. But this, if true, of course, was already completely bad. Shikamaru didn't know who he could trust in the house. In his opinion, everyone in this family was suspicious, even the 7-year-old boy. Itachi is a genius, God only knows what he thinks. What exactly the elder Uchiha Shikamaru did, he did not know, but he suspected that Itachi was somehow connected with the Federal Security Service, and, as is well known, there were simply no good and sane people there. Sasuke, this philologist with a dark past, also did not inspire confidence in the Nara at all. There was nothing to say about Orochimaru, whom Menma sometimes called grandmother. The jury only needed to look at that face to say, guilty. Shikamaru generally thought that he had already seen those clear eyes and confident look in Sing Sing, where he came to be interrogated by an old friend. Menma reminded the FBI agent of Mowgli. In addition, the child was rather strange in himself, since his appearance almost completely coincided with both Naruto's and Sasuke's appearance. Sometimes, somewhat delirious thoughts came into Shikamaru's head about this. He, of course, drove them away, but Menma still sent a chill down his spine. The story of Naruto Uzumaki's dismissal was shrouded in secrecy, which also did not contribute to trust. Nara, naturally, did not consider the Uchiha's husband an agent of the world behind the scenes or a member of the fifth column, but this compatriot gave rise to some fears in his soul. There were dark rumors that Itachi had a hand in the dismissal of the capital's Minister of Culture. And relatives are not kicked out of their cherished government positions without reason. Shikamaru sighed and stubbed out his cigarette. Why was he getting all this? There were 2 spare flak jackets stashed away in the storage room, and Nara didn't know who to give them to. Menma probably looked the most harmless, even if he was the product of some kind of genetic experiments. Nara shuddered, driving away unnecessary thoughts. One vest will be for Menma, but who will he give the second one to? After all, if he gives it to the wrong person, it will be a fatal mistake. Nara was not used to relying on intuition. But in this situation there was no choice. Shikamaru? Naruto coughed a little awkwardly. The agent raised his head and looked closely at Uzumaki. Where have you been? Naruto blushed as deeply as only teenagers blush when caught in the act of committing a crime. Sasuke and I just had a little discussion about everything that was going on and... Okay, Shikamaru interrupted a little nervously. I understand. Come with me. Uzumaki cast a long glance upward and quickly followed the agent, as if he was in a hurry. Shikamaru suppressed a sigh, glad, however, that he had hardly made a mistake with his choice. The agent took a bulletproof vest out of the storage room and handed it to Naruto. He looked at the outstretched hand with confusion. What is this? Bulletproof vest. Nara expected any question, but not the one Uzumaki asked. Can I give it to Sasuke? No, Shikamaru said slowly. It's just for you. You'll get a new down jacket, a couple sizes bigger. And try, if you suddenly go out, to put the vest on so that no one sees. Naruto frowned and shook his head. Sasuke will see. Okay, then Sasuke will be in the know, the agent replied somewhat irritably, still handing over the vest. The closet door closed quietly. On the second floor, someone turned on the tap in the bathroom. But why? Because this was Sasuke's family from the start. He's one of them. And the likelihood that they want to kill him is pretty low. The former Minister of Culture seemed shocked by this remark. He considered the information for a while and then remarked. So, one of us hired the killer? I'm afraid so. Or one of the FBI agents, but that would be a completely unbelievable conspiracy theory. Naruto looked at Shikamaru in confusion, clutching his flak jacket to himself. I'm going to bed, Naruto finally said. Don't even think about giving the Uchiha the vest, Shikamaru said sternly after him. I know you made peace, and now you want to protect him more than anything in the world. But you have to understand that Sasuke is not the type to survive the death of a loved one. Naruto winced and wandered upstairs. Good night, Shikamaru. Uzumaki suddenly froze in the middle of the stairs and looked down intently. This look made the agent's soul uneasy. Never in his life had he seen so much strength, confidence, and intelligence in just one look. And this despite the fact that Naruto had never been a genius. Real mysticism. Every person meets such amazing people at least once in their life. Good night, Naruto. Naruto slowly opened his eye and saw Sasuke's face through the veil of weak sunlight. Uchiha was sleeping, and it seemed like the morning itself was breathing on his chest. The sun's rays lay at the foot of the bed, and a blizzard of dust particles swirled in the air. A crazy idea came to Uzumaki. He slowly sat up, looked at the sleeping Sasuke and quietly went down. There was no one in the kitchen. And again the frost covered the glass, the frost disease struck. Naruto opened the refrigerator, but there was nothing new in it except for pasta. Pasta wasn't considered a worthy dish for breakfast in bed, so Uzumaki simply made coffee and went back upstairs. Sasuke was still sleeping. However, when a slight noise sounded very close, he opened his eyes and automatically looked at the mug. There were black patterned streaks of coffee on the edges. Naruto put the mug on the nightstand and reached for Sasuke. He exhaled, allowed himself to be kissed and dispelled the newly surging despondency. In old age one always loves more superstitiously, right, Uzumaki? Naruto snorted and threw a pillow at the Uchiha. I'm still a long way from reaching my decline of years. Thank God. Sasuke said nothing, taking a sip of coffee. The blanket fluttered. Naruto climbed back into bed and pressed his side against the Uchiha. A dark palm stroked her knee and slid to the inside of her thigh. Uchiha's hot breath slid across his cheek. It was conveyed in these sonorous sighs that he alone was all life, that he alone was memory, tenderness, and truth. No, Sasuke said slowly, placing the mug on the nightstand. At night. If we live long enough. Uzumaki nodded and leaned his head back on the back of the bed. He still remembered how just a few hours ago he and Sasuke had sex, how he had to cover Sasuke's mouth with his hands so as not to wake Menma, who was sleeping in the next room. These memories haunted him, naturally, not wanting to let go. Sasuke. Uchiha stood up, searching the floor for his clothes. He eventually picked up Naruto's shirt and put it on. What? I was wondering if you were a maniac? Like in that TV series where the literature professor was obsessed with Edgar Poe and killed his female students. Sasuke turned around and crossed his arms over his chest. Don't think anymore. Naruto smiled. I was joking. First of all, Sasuke picked up the two mugs with a clank, intending to go to the kitchen and wash them. This isn't funny. Secondly, instead of watching the followers, you should read a book. When Naruto and Sasuke came downstairs, Shikamaru and Itachi were already sitting at the table. Good morning. Uzumaki smiled broadly and sat down at the table with a bang. They looked at him with confusion. I apologize, Naruto added immediately, remembering the agents who were wounded yesterday. How are your colleagues? They'll live, Shikamaru answered. One was wounded in the leg, the other in the arm. Sai, that young man from the store, by the way, is okay too. Relatively. He's in the hospital. Itachi looked at his brother, who was silently washing cups. Everything is fine? Now, yes, Sasuke simply answered, opening the drawer and putting the clean dishes away. Soon a sleepy Menma arrived, dragging a stuffed fox behind him. Today it was Orochimaru's turn to cook. He wasn't very good at it, but he never refused. He silently took things out of the cupboards, cut pasta for some reason. He even threw away the cheese and for some reason burned a piece of bacon in the pan. At least, Naruto thought it was bacon. It was as if his right hand didn't know what his left hand was doing. It all looked pretty scary. I didn't want to think about how this senseless horror would end, not at all. The pasta, swollen and unseasoned, floated in the pan. Sasuke was trying to think of a way to distract his son from eating. He didn't really want Menma to eat something like that. But Menma, as Shikamaru noted, was a strange child, precocious. He figured out what to do himself. I'm not hungry. Menma ran into the next room. The fox sat alone on his chair. Beady eyes seemed to look at Naruto with disapproval. So, the killer was hired by one of us, Orochimaru calmly noted, laying out the utensils. Naruto sighed and pushed his plate away from him. Could we not discuss this topic at the table? Why not discuss it, since we have nothing else to talk about anyway? This was partly true. There were few common interests in this family. Perhaps the only thing that united Itachi, Orochimaru, Naruto and Menma was their love for Sasuke. We can talk about Eton College, the elder Uchiha reminded. No, Naruto interrupted sharply, trying to find Sasuke's palm under the table. This is still a bad idea. Shikamaru looked up from his breakfast and at Itachi. Did you want to send Menma to a private school? That would be beyond my authority, Itachi remarked with a barely noticeable smile. Naruto finally took Sasuke's hand in his own and intertwined his fingers. Sometimes he acted like a teenager. We thought about it, Uzumaki said quietly. But Menma is too special. Besides, it's unlikely that English gentlemen would treat him without prejudice, Sasuke said dryly, not trying to tear his palm from the tenacious grip. And not only because he was raised in a homosexual family, if you know what I mean. Shikamaru knew that aristocratic arrogance could be quite painful for people from the solid middle class. However, for some reason, Nara was sure that it would not be so easy to offend Menma. As for me, Orochimaru was the first to start eating. It's better to discuss a murderer than English gentlemen. Itachi chuckled slightly and turned the page of the book he had been quietly reading. Probably, whoever hired the killer must move in very specific circles. Orochimaru looked at Naruto, and he suddenly became really angry. Why he got angry God knows. Psychology is a very mysterious thing. Sometimes you can't predict what even the most innocent phrase will turn into. However, it is unlikely that Orochimaru had anything to do with the word innocence. There are many jokes and funny stories about an evil mother-in-law, but all this is not experienced with a smile when it happens in real life. Orochimaru couldn't stand Naruto. The boy was a bad influence on Sasuke. He dragged him into his insidious liberal networks, and poisoned him with Hashirama Senju's posts, which he himself probably savored with sadistic pleasure every evening. Besides all that, Uzumaki was arrogant and open to progress. When Orochimaru learned that the initiative to have a child came from Naruto, he hated him even more. Orochimaru grew up in a strictly patriarchal society and perceived homosexual families as a wild phenomenon brought to their land by an unkind western wind. Okay, Shikamaru tried to smooth things over. Let's talk about the killer instead. It was late. The conversation had already turned to, "Who are you anyway?" And the general tension only added fuel to the fire. Naruto threw down his fork and looked at his relatives with hostility. You're no better. Who knows what kind of acquaintances you've made abroad? I haven't been abroad. The hint was understood, and Orochimaru's voice rang with cold contempt. Of course. Naruto was genuinely surprised. But they said that they went. Naruto, Sasuke began threateningly, looking gloomily at Uzumaki. The younger Uchiha was good at ending debates, but even he was powerless now. Shikamaru tried again to remind them that there was an experienced assassin walking around, but no one seemed to care. Oh, you should just keep quiet. Naruto got angry. As if I was the one who was almost kicked out of the department when I was caught with a ribbon on my sleeve in the middle of the square. Sasuke, Orochimaru said in horror. Shikamaru couldn't take it anymore. His nerves were already on edge. He needed to regain control of the situation. Immediately, Nara simply raised his gun and spoke clearly and calmly. So, if anyone says another word about the square, the peninsula, or anything like that, I swear to God I'll shoot. Everyone fell silent. Thank you, Shikamaru said and put the gun away. Now about the killer. However, the conversation stopped flowing. Everyone somehow lost their enthusiasm. Not one member of the family had any serious suspicions about anyone. Shikamaru could only sigh. He thought this family would drive anyone crazy. Sasuke! Menma's voice could probably be heard throughout the valley. Sasuke, our house is on TV. The younger Uchiha slowly stood up, gave Uzumaki a disparaging look, and went into another room. Naruto looked at the fox Menma had abandoned and was thinking about something of his own. He even pressed the palm he was holding Sasuke's hand with to his cheek, sighing at his own sentimentality. The TV actually showed Naruto and Sasuke's house. Or rather, what was left of it. The charred ruins, the fountains of foam and water from the fire extinguishers, it all looked rather pitiful. The gray capital sky sent them its farewell. Hello. What kind of restless people are we? Naruto asked, exhaling noisily. He forgot himself and hugged Uchiha from behind by the shoulders, swaying slightly from side to side. Sasuke looked at him coldly, but did not move away. Someone really doesn't like us, Uzumaki whispered. Or just the opposite. Naruto flinched and looked at the back of the Uchiha's head in confusion. A hired killer can't hit a professor and a civil servant. They burned down our house, but we're still alive. Doesn't that seem strange to you? It seems strange to me that my mother-in-law is a crazy scientist who dreams of getting rid of me. Sasuke resisted the urge to smirk and nudged Naruto with his elbow. I'm serious. Me too, Sasuke, Uzumaki said quietly, still not breaking the embrace. The situation itself is, how would you say, grotesque. Everything around is somehow strange and unnatural, although personally I am sure that everything is in its place. That I am in my place. Sasuke turned around and looked at him. Although my journey home is still ongoing, I am now at the right stage. Despite the theatricality of everything that is happening. You should doubt, Sasuke said, feeling Menma's grip on his arm. Smart people always doubt. Naruto smiled. I am an exception. Menma pulled Sasuke towards himself, trying to squeeze between his parents. He was, in general, glad that everything was okay now. That he wouldn't have to hear his parents' cold voices, soaked in bile and irony. Life wasn't easy for him as it was. I'll go chop some wood, it's cold. Naruto pulled away, ruffled Menma's hair, and went to get dressed. He was gone for a while, then heavy footsteps were heard on the stairs. Shikamaru was smoking by the window and looking out into the yard. There were 2 agents in the house next door who were keeping the situation under control. Or at least they should have been. Don't go alone, Naruto. Uzumaki looked at the agent with confusion, swung his axe and smiled somewhat tensely. I can handle it. Naruto knew that no one else had a bulletproof vest except him. No need. Itachi slowly put the book aside. I'll go with you. Shikamaru put out his cigarette. He noticed that Uzumaki hesitated for a moment, but then he thanked him for his help and left with Itachi outside. The sun peeked out from behind the clouds, and its timid rays glided across the parquet floor of the living room. Time passed lazily and boringly. Sasuke sat with Menma on the couch and read something out loud. The telephone rang, breaking the midday bliss. Something happened, Shikamaru thought as he looked at the number. I'm listening, the agent said slowly, sitting down on the sofa. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then they spoke. Nara listened carefully, said, I understand, and hung up. He looked at the floor for a minute, then turned his gaze to Sasuke, the only adult in the room. The younger Uchiha stopped reading. He calmly told Menma to go upstairs and turned to the agent. We checked the bank accounts of all family members, in case anyone had withdrawn money to hire an assassin. Sasuke finished. His voice was even, his face inscrutable. Exactly. I have bad news. Uchiha continued to look at Shikamaru expectantly. Naruto Uzumaki recently withdrew a large sum of money from the account. The agent found it difficult to speak. He had to tell mothers that their sons had died, he had to tell husbands that they had become widowers, but never before had he felt such a crushing feeling as now. However, to Shikamaru's great surprise, Sasuke only chuckled softly and leaned back in his chair. Up until that moment he had been sitting up straight, like a true aristocrat. Bad news indeed, Uchiha said with a sad smile. Who knows what kind of junk he spent the money on again? Sasuke, listen, Shikamaru began carefully. But Sasuke didn't listen. You know, to sell something unnecessary, you first have to buy something unnecessary. Naruto suffers a little from a mania for senseless purchases. So you don't consider this suspicious? Uchiha seemed to look with some surprise. No, I don't think so. In the event of your death, who gets the bulk of the money? This question was quite appropriate, but it sounded so vulgar and impolite that Shikamaru felt uneasy. Naruto. Have you made a will? Yes. I didn't want my money to go to some retired scientist's crazy experiments. Are you talking about your guardian? Sasuke nodded. You've never been in these laboratories, he said for some reason. God willing, you never end up there. Nara felt a little chill from these simple and sincere words. Suddenly there was a noise and a crash of an opening door. Itachi stood at the threshold. A red stain was spreading along the sleeve of his down jacket. Sasuke, was the first thing the elder Uchiha said, trying to maintain his balance. Sasuke stood up and stopped Menma from running down with a gesture. Shikamaru silently went upstairs so that at least the child would stay away from this mess. Let's go to the guest room, there's a first aid kit there. Itachi slowly followed his brother, looking intently at his back. The guest room was located behind the stairs. It was clean and bright, with a large window facing east. From the room you could go out onto the terrace, see the distant mountains, the winding highway to nowhere. Itachi sat down on a chair and took off his down jacket. The wound on his arm was not deep. Sasuke, the elder Uchiha said slowly. He tried to kill me. Sasuke took out the peroxide. Who? Naruto? Itachi turned around. Listen. No, Sasuke said evenly. I believe you. Shikamaru told me that he withdrew a large sum of money from the account. The elder Uchiha frowned and closed his eyes. I'm really sorry. Sasuke silently picked up a wooden vase from the table and approached. Me too. The next second, the silence was broken by a dull sound of impact. Sasuke practiced many forms of combat, trying to learn something somehow. He knew that the day would come when these skills would come in handy. Itachi quietly and meekly sank face down on the table, losing consciousness. He trusted Sasuke. Considering him a weak little brother, this was Itachi's only weakness. It was rather dramatic that the younger brother was able to use his advantage only in his 29th year. Sasuke's will, he wouldn't have used it at all. Shikamaru came to the noise, holding a gun in front of him professionally. Tie him up. The agent was in no hurry to put the weapon away. I'm sorry? He said that Naruto tried to kill him. Shikamaru still couldn't understand why he had to tie Itachi up. Now, by all the laws of logic, he had to somehow neutralize Uzumaki and force him to call off the killer, but what Sasuke was doing was completely pointless. It's difficult, Sasuke finally said reluctantly. Nara felt his nerves slowly but surely failing him. Difficult. The only thing that was difficult here was not to go crazy. There was a rustling of footsteps behind them. Orochimaru looked over Shikamaru's shoulder at the scene in the room, but said nothing. Naruto probably needs help, the Uchiha added slowly, turning his gaze to his brother. I'll take care of it. Orochimaru walked slowly towards the door. Shikamaru knew he had to stop him. He knew he had to threaten him, shoot him in the ceiling, do whatever it took to get all these crazy people to sit down and tell the truth. He shouldn't have lost control, but the absurdity of the situation made it hard to think straight. It all happened too fast. Shikamaru read a lot of detective stories. Nesbo, Agatha Christie, Arthur Conan Doyle. It was stupid to think about such things, but in life everything turned out to be far from so compositionally smooth. Events fell on people like snow on the head. And what does the damn instructor have to do with it? Or maybe the instructor had nothing to do with it. Maybe he was an accident. It's only in books that accidents don't happen, but Shikamaru is real. He breathes, he exists, and he's not the fruit of someone else's pen. Such thoughts seemed crazy to the agent, and he threw them away, took a deep breath and pulled himself together. Naruto had a strange dream. Sasuke was sitting in a room furnished in the Greek style, on a bench, and weaving some yarn. Weaving, and then unraveling the work and showing the threads to his brother, spreading his arms. The cold brought Uzumaki out of his semi-delirious state. He had to open his eyes and look at the sky. Thoughts somehow got mixed up, flowed slowly, sometimes disappearing from my head altogether. Snow crunched nearby. Uzumaki turned around, saw Orochimaru's face in front of him, and groaned in resignation. Am I in hell? You got there a long time ago. About 7 years ago, when you immigrated. Naruto sighed. It's just like the myth of the expulsion of Adam and Eve. He smiled wryly. Sasuke would have punched me in the face for Eva. They shot at me. Uzumaki finally said. What are you doing here? I came to give you first aid. Orochimaru said as if it were a matter of course. I thought you hired a killer, and now you've come to finish him off. Orochimaru chuckled. So you decided that I found a killer to kill you all here, and Sasuke and I walked off into the sunset? You know, even perversions have their limits. Naruto sniffed loudly, looked away from the sky and raised himself up slightly, leaning on his elbows. You know better. Orochimaru even held him back a little. After so many years, he was ready to come to terms with the existence of Uzumaki, even though he couldn't stand him. As they say, there's always a black sheep in the family. The snow crunched again. Sasuke stepped out of the shadows like an actor on stage. There was such drama going on that any sane person would have asked for the cup to be carried past him. What did you spend the money on? Was the first thing Uchiha asked. Naruto looked at him in surprise. How do you know? It's a surprise, damn it. Sasuke closed his eyes for a moment. Okay. Uzumaki crossed his arms over his chest. I just thought, you like books. I bought one, from the 16th century, so strange. I found a brochure about an auction on my desk. I have no idea where it came from. Uchiha looked at Shikamaru, who was standing nearby, with a searching look. Where is the book? At home? Naruto continued to stare without a glimmer of understanding. The house burned down, Sasuke. Sasuke mentally asked the gods to give him patience. No, Uzumaki said slowly. She wasn't at home, of course. In a safe deposit box. He dictated the cell number and the name of the bank so that the FBI could verify this information. There was still a lot of trouble ahead, connected with confirming the authenticity and checking all the necessary papers. You're an idiot. Really? Naruto asked irritably. At least he's not crazy like your brother. Sasuke hit him hard on the head. Perhaps you could explain everything in order? Shikamaru finally came closer. Itachi seems to be coming to his senses. Why did you knock him out? Sasuke looked away and frowned slightly. Got angry. Shikamaru previously thought that the Black Ripper case was the hardest one of his career, but now he realized that he was wrong. I told him I was sorry, Sasuke added for some reason. Itachi actually came to his senses, slowly placed his hand on the back of his head, and raised himself up. The first thing he could focus his gaze on was his younger brother's face. There was no sign of approval on the younger Uchiha's face. Shikamaru received a call to say that the rubble had been cleared and that reinforcements had arrived. I asked you to look after my brother, Itachi said quietly. You promised me you would. And how did it all end? With Hinata and an empty house. Naruto flinched. It's none of your business, Sasuke said calmly. Sasuke went on this camping trip. Lived in some unknown forest, did God knows what all alone. And you were having dinner with Hinata and satisfying your own ambitions. I can't imagine how you slept at night. Naruto didn't answer, frantically thinking about how he actually ended up in such a life. It was great that someone was able to stop him, even if it was Sasuke's slightly crazy brother. All Naruto did was say, he was beautiful. But what the hell was Uzumaki? Isn't he alive? No, he was broken. I just decided that I could fix it. Play the role I was meant to play. Anyone in Itachi's place would have asked to pass the cup of responsibility, but Itachi did not ask. No one really knew whether he had the right to interfere. The answer to that question would only be given time. Would the spark, lit artificially, or was it lit artificially at all, burn? Would the phoenix born from the ashes survive? Maybe Itachi was just a tool in the hands of something mystical. Or maybe not. You know, the elder Uchiha said thoughtfully, looking at Shikamaru. People are very much brought together by the awareness of danger. Now they are in a quarrel, and at gunpoint they grab each other and ask, "No, please kill me instead of him." A stressful situation can provide the necessary shake-up if you feed it. To feed, Nara repeated for some reason. He suddenly thought that this probably wasn't a full confession. It was unlikely that anyone here was going to corroborate Shikamaru's testimony in court. Besides, Itachi could afford the best lawyers, and he probably had a plan for what to do next. You killed your own cousin and instructor for this? Itachi looked at the agent. I didn't kill any of them. Obito was most likely killed by the same person who killed Sasuke and my parents, and I was just using the witness protection program for my own purposes. As for the instructor, he'll probably be found drunk today or tomorrow at some friend's house. Well, that remains to be seen, Shikamaru replied calmly. I'm afraid you'll have to come with us. But first, call off your half-killer, for heaven's sake. Itachi looked at him carefully. Nara realized he was preparing to deny everything. Well, this war was going to be a long one. But at least they had sorted out most of the confusion. Not a bad start. An unconventional method of psychological influence, Orochimaru noted, packing his things. Remember what happened to that girl from the movie V for Vendetta? It's a good movie. Shikamaru approved. Naruto groaned and stretched out on the couch, throwing his hands behind his head. If you lived where I lived, you would forever lose the desire to watch such films. Even without that, there would be someone to cry about and someone to pity. Should I feel sorry for you, victim of the regime? Snorted Uchiha, brushing Naruto's bangs off his forehead. Uzumaki smiled and pulled the caressing palm towards him. Me first. Menma wandered thoughtfully through the rooms, dragging behind him a stuffed animal that looked like a monster from a horror movie. Nara felt like he should say a few comforting words to the kid, but he had no idea how he would react. Menma had grown up at home, had never been to kindergarten, and was just starting school, which he naturally didn't like. He wanted to go abroad, wanted independence, and who the hell knew what was going on in his head. Shikamaru didn't know if anything good would come out of this child, but he knew for sure that Menma would survive. In the courtyard, suitcases were already being loaded into the car. Whoever had killed Obito was still at large, and that meant a new witness program, new names, and a new danger. Shikamaru found himself thinking that Itachi could very well be the one who killed both his parents and his cousin. But that was yet to be determined. Right now, the survivors needed to be isolated again. What a dark irony. There were fewer and fewer of them. It was as if a jeweler were cutting a diamond, sifting out all the unnecessary. Who knew what would remain at the end of the work, or if there would be anything left at all? The frosty morning was bright and light. The snowdrifts sparkled in the sun. Naruto looked at the sky, full of radiant azure, and walked up to the car. He smiled at Menma through the glass and looked into Sasuke's eyes. You know, if we broke up, I would come to you to die. The plan had already been thought out, and the end of the journey was inevitable. If they parted now, nothing would change. After all, one day, in the late peace, in absolute satisfaction, Naruto would hear someone sigh in the wind. He would realize that Sasuke was waiting for him with secret anxiety. Evil and good would unite. Yes, Naruto would come to Sasuke to die. As they drove away from the valley, as they broke free from the snowy alpine wings, it was snowing. Naruto was sorry that he would have to spend Christmas in a car. Now he drove confidently, despite everything, knowing that this path would lead him home. Whether it was the right path or not, It was leading in the right direction. After traveling many roads, both sea and land, Naruto finally felt like he had found the one that would lead him home. Sasuke, now seated in the back seat, celebrated the small opening by reciting poetry. Let all those who have seen the fire of life remember their true path at the end of the 4th day. Orochimaru was sleeping. Menma sat with his temple against the glass, listening to the Uchiha and looking out the window. Sasuke, he said suddenly. What's that there in the snow? Uchiha stopped reading and turned around. Something did indeed flash among the white valleys. Someone's vague silhouette, as if by chance. I don't know, Sasuke said calmly. Anything can happen in this world, Menma.